I froze at my mother's front door, my hand still raised to knock. A teenage girl had opened it, maybe 15 years old, with long dark hair and eyes that made my breath catch. My eyes. She smiled politely, tilting her head. "Can I help you?" she asked. Then, glancing at the package in my hands, "Oh, are you Mrs. Reed from the Neighborhood Association?" My stomach dropped. Mrs. Reed. She didn't know me. Before I could find words, my mother appeared behind her, her face draining of all color. "Leela, go inside," Marjorie said sharply, her voice tight with panic. The girl, Leela, my daughter, looked confused but obeyed, stepping back into the house. I watched her disappear down the hallway, this stranger who was my child. Marjorie stepped onto the porch, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. Her eyes were hard, defensive, terrified all at once. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. I stared at my mother, this woman who'd raised me, who I'd trusted with everything. My voice came out trembling, barely audible. "Mom," I managed. "Why does she think I'm dead?" Marjorie's jaw tightened. She glanced back at the door, then at me. "We need to talk, but not here, not now." My legs felt weak, my mind spinning with impossible questions. Marjorie grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me away from the door. "You're confused, Danica," she said loudly, clearly for Leela's benefit if she was listening. "This isn't a good time for visitors." But I wasn't confused. I'd seen recognition in my mother's eyes, seen the panic. She knew exactly who I was and why I was here. "I want to see her," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to talk to my daughter." "Your daughter?" Marjorie's laugh was bitter and cruel. "You haven't been her mother in 15 years. Through the window, I could see Leela watching us, her face curious and concerned. She looked so much like I had at her age, the same dark curls, the same questioning eyes. When our gazes met through the glass, something flickered in her expression. Recognition, impossible. She thought I was dead. Marjorie noticed and stepped between us, blocking Leela's view. "Go back to your piano practice," she called through the door. Leela hesitated, then slowly moved away. My mother turned back to me, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You lost the right to call her yours 15 years ago, Danica, the day you fell apart, the day you proved you weren't fit to be anyone's mother." The words hit like physical blows. "That's not what happened," I whispered. "You promised it was temporary, you said." "I said what I needed to say," Marjorie interrupted. "Now leave before I call the police." I drove away with tears blurring my vision, pulling over after 2 blocks because I couldn't see the road anymore. My hands shook on the steering wheel as 15 years of memories crashed over me like waves. The postpartum depression that had felt like drowning. The way colors had seemed muted, sounds too loud, my baby's cries like knives in my brain. The custody hearing where I'd sat silent and numb while my mother spoke for me. "She needs help," Marjorie had told the judge, her voice full of concern. "Professional help. I can provide temporary care for the baby until Danica recovers." Temporary. That word had meant everything then. I'd believed her. Believed that once I got better, once the darkness lifted, I'd get my baby back. My mother had promised. I opened the glove compartment, searching for tissues, and found an old envelope I'd forgotten about. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. It was a letter I'd written to Leela 5 years ago for her 10th birthday. I'd sent it to my mother's address, hoping Marjorie would pass it along. The envelope had been returned 2 weeks later, unopened, and stamped across the front in angry red letters, "Deceased." I stared at that word now, my heart pounding. Deceased. My mother had told the postal service I was dead. Had she told Leela the same thing? The flashbacks came in pieces, sharp and painful. I remembered the hospital room after Leela was born, how the joy I was supposed to feel never came, just emptiness and fear. My ex-husband, Troy, had tried to help, but he didn't understand. Nobody did, except my mother. Marjorie had moved in with us, taking over the baby's care while I struggled to get out of bed. "You're just overwhelmed," she'd said soothingly. "First-time mothers often feel this way. You need rest." But rest didn't help. The darkness got worse. I started having thoughts that terrified me, thoughts about how everyone would be better off if I just disappeared. That's when Troy called my mother in panic and Marjorie took charge completely. "She needs professional help," Marjorie told him firmly. "Intensive therapy, maybe even hospitalization. And the baby can't be here while she's like this." The custody hearing happened so fast I barely remembered it. My mother had hired a lawyer, filed emergency paperwork, cited my depression as evidence of unfitness. "It's just temporary," she'd assured me repeatedly. "Just until you're well, just until you can handle being a mother." I'd signed papers I didn't fully read, trusting her completely. She was my mother. She wanted what was best for her granddaughter, or so I'd believed. Now, sitting in my car with that returned letter in my hands, I remembered something else. A social worker who'd pulled me aside after one of my supervised visits. "Your mother's pulling strings you don't see," she'd whispered urgently. "Be careful, Danica, document everything." I hadn't understood then. I understood now. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. His name was Carlos, and he came highly recommended by a lawyer friend. We met in a small office that smelled like coffee and old paper. "I need you to verify custody records," I told him, sliding a folder across his desk. "My mother was granted temporary guardianship of my daughter 15 years ago. I want to know if it was ever made permanent, and I want to know what she told the courts about me." Carlos took notes, his expression neutral and professional. "This might take a few days," he warned. "Court records from that long ago aren't always digitized." It took 3 days. When Carlos called me back, his voice was shaking. "Ms. Danica, I need you to sit down." My heart started pounding. "What did you find?" "There's no record of you being declared permanently unfit," he said carefully. "The temporary guardianship was filed, yes. But it should have required regular reviews, check-ins with you, proof that you were still unable to care for your daughter. None of that happened." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "It means your mother lied. She filed paperwork that made it look official, but it was never properly processed through the courts. She moved counties about 6 months after getting temporary custody, which made it harder to track." I closed my eyes. The room spinning. "There's something else," Carlos added, his voice dropping. "Something worse. Danica, your death certificate was filed by her." I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what Carlos had just said. "My what?" I managed. "Your death certificate. It's in the county records. Filed 15 years ago, just 3 months after the guardianship was granted. It lists your name, a fake date of death, even a hospital stamp that doesn't match any actual hospital in the state." Carlos sent me a digital copy. I stared at it on my computer screen, this document that claimed I'd died at age 23. The paperwork looked official, with stamps and signatures and everything a death certificate should have. Except it was completely fraudulent. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor of my apartment, the laptop sliding off my lap. My mother had declared me dead. Legally, officially, she'd erased me from existence. That's why the letters I'd sent to Leela were returned marked deceased. That's why my daughter thought I was gone. "There's a pattern here," Carlos said through the phone, his voice gentle now. "Your mother filed this death certificate the same week she moved to a different county. She was covering her tracks, making it harder for anyone to question her custody or come looking for you." "But why?" I whispered, though part of me already understood. Control. My mother had always needed control, and a daughter with postpartum depression, struggling to recover, was unpredictable. A dead daughter was much easier to explain to a confused child. 2 days later, I returned to my mother's house. This time I had a plan. I bought a package of craft supplies online and wrapped it carefully. "Just dropping off something for the art teacher," I'd say if anyone asked. I parked down the street and walked slowly to the house, my heart hammering. Through the front window, I could see Leela sitting at a piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. She looked happy, confident, completely at peace. A stranger's life built on lies. I stood there for several minutes, just watching my daughter exist in a world where I was dead. She was beautiful, talented, clearly well cared for. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let her keep this peaceful life instead of destroying it with truth. But she deserved to know. And I deserved to be known. As if sensing my presence, Leela looked up from the piano. Our eyes met through the glass. She tilted her head, studying my face with that same curious expression from before. Then her eyes widened slightly and she stood up. She ran to the front door, opening it before I could knock. "Hey," she said, slightly breathless. "I've seen you before the other day, right?" I nodded, unable to speak. Leela studied me more closely. "Actually, I think I've seen you before that too, in a photo. Wait here." She disappeared back into the house, leaving me frozen on the doorstep. Leela returned carrying a small photograph, yellowed with age and slightly creased. She held it carefully, like it was precious. "I found this in Grandma's jewelry box a few months ago," she said, showing me the picture. It was me 15 years younger, holding a newborn baby. My face was pale and tired, but I was smiling at the tiny bundle in my arms. At Leela. "Grandma said this was her sister," Leela continued, watching my face. "But she looks exactly like me, don't you think? And the baby." She trailed off, connecting pieces in her mind. My throat tightened with tears. I wanted to lie to protect her from the truth a little longer, but I'd been silent for 15 years. She lied, sweetheart, I whispered, my voice breaking. That woman in the photo isn't your great-aunt, I'm your mother. Leela's face went pale. The photograph slipped from her fingers, falling to the porch. That's not funny, she said, but her voice shook. My mom died when I was a baby. Grandma told me. Your grandma lied, I said more firmly. I didn't die, Leela. I've been alive this whole time. I've been looking for you, trying to find you, writing letters that were sent back. She told you I was dead so you wouldn't look for me. Leela stepped back, shaking her head. No, that's crazy. Grandma wouldn't. Leela. My mother's voice cut through the air like ice. What are you doing out here? Marjorie appeared in the doorway, her face twisted with rage when she saw me. She looked at the photograph on the ground, then at Leela's confused face, and something ugly crossed her expression. Go upstairs, she ordered Leela, her voice sharp. Now. But Leela didn't move, still staring at me. Grandma, she says she's my mom. She says you lied about. Marjorie moved faster than I expected, reaching out and slapping the photograph out of Leela's hand. It skittered across the porch. Go. Upstairs, she repeated, each word hard and deliberate. Leela flinched, more from shock than pain. I'd never seen my mother hit anyone before. You're scaring her, I said, stepping forward. Stop it. Marjorie turned her fury on me. You've done enough damage, coming here, filling her head with your delusions. You had a breakdown, Danica. You were hospitalized. You couldn't tell reality from fantasy then, and apparently you still can't. Her words were calculated, designed to make me doubt myself. But I had documentation now, proof. I have my medical records, I said calmly. I was never permanently institutionalized. I got treatment, I got better, and you kept my daughter from me anyway. Leela was frozen on the stairs now, halfway up, watching this confrontation with wide eyes. Mom, she whispered, but she was looking at Marjorie, not me. The words stabbed through my heart. Marjorie grabbed Leela's arm, dragging her the rest of the way up the stairs. Don't come back here, she called down to me, or I'll call the police. I didn't leave immediately. I stood on that porch, staring at the photograph still lying on the ground. Finally, I picked it up, tucked it carefully into my purse, and walked back to my car. My phone rang before I'd driven a block. Marjorie. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. If you come near this house again, she said without preamble, I will file for a restraining order. I'll tell the police you're harassing us. I'll tell them you're mentally unstable and dangerous. You told her I was dead, I said quietly. You filed a fake death certificate. You stole 15 years of my daughter's life and mine. I protected her, Marjorie shot back. From what you would have become, from the instability, the depression, the risk, you were broken, Danica, you still are. I was sick, I corrected. And I got better. But you didn't want me to get better, did you? You wanted a do-over. A chance to raise a baby the way you thought I should have been raised. Silence on the other end. She's mine now, Marjorie said finally. You had your chance and you failed. Don't destroy her life because you can't accept that. I took a deep breath, feeling something settle inside me. Certainty, purpose. Then I'll make sure the world knows what you've done, I said quietly. Every lie, every forged document, every stolen moment, all of it. I hung up before she could respond. I found the social worker from 15 years ago through online searches and sheer determination. Her name was Patricia, and she'd retired 5 years earlier but agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. She looked older but still had the same sharp eyes I remembered. I wondered if you'd ever come back, Patricia said when we sat down. I always suspected your mother tampered with the custody paperwork, but I couldn't prove it. The case was transferred out of my jurisdiction before I could investigate properly. Why did you suspect? I asked. Patricia stirred her coffee slowly. Your mother was too controlling, too insistent that you never be allowed unsupervised visits. Most grandparents in temporary custody situations want the parent to recover and reunify. Your mother seemed to want the opposite. She explained how Marjorie had maneuvered the legal system, filing paperwork in different counties, using vague medical language that suggested I was permanently impaired without actually providing proper documentation. If you can find the original birth record, Patricia said carefully, the one filed when Leela was born, you can prove you're her legal mother. That might be enough to expose the whole lie. Where would I find that? County Vital Records Office. It should be public record, though. Patricia hesitated. If your mother was thorough, she might have tried to alter that too. I left the coffee shop with new determination and a growing sense of dread about what else I might discover. The county vital records office smelled like dust and old paper. I approached the clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, and requested my daughter's birth certificate. "Name and date of birth," she asked, typing into her computer. I provided the information, watching her face as she searched. She frowned, clicked through several screens, then looked up at me with an uneasy expression. "Can I see your ID?" she asked. I handed it over. She studied it carefully, comparing my name to whatever was on her screen. "Is something wrong?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The clerk hesitated. "Your mother came here last month," she said quietly. "Asking for the same thing. She said she needed a corrected copy because the hospital had made errors." My heart sank. "What kind of errors?" The clerk glanced around, then slid a document across the desk. It was Leela's birth certificate, but something was wrong. Under mother's name, it didn't list Danica. It listed Marjorie. "This can't be right," I whispered. "I gave birth to her. I was there. This is my daughter." The clerk's face was sympathetic. I pulled the original file to compare. "Your mother had the birth certificate amended 15 years ago, claiming you were deceased and she was adopting her grandchild. The amendment was improperly filed, but it's in our system now." My hands shook as I held the fraudulent document. Marjorie hadn't just declared me dead. She'd legally erased me as Leela's mother entirely, replacing herself in the records. My fury hardened into cold resolve. If my mother wanted to play legal games, I'd beat her at them. But first, I needed to talk to Troy, Leela's father. I'd avoided contacting him for years, ashamed of how everything had fallen apart. But I needed to know what he'd been told. I found him through social media, remarried with 2 young kids. When I called, he sounded shocked to hear my voice. "Danica, I thought." "Marjorie said you'd died. In the hospital. She said the depression got so bad that you..." He trailed off, unable to finish. "I didn't die," I said quietly. "Your ex-mother-in-law lied to you." We met at a neutral location, a park far from both our homes. Troy looked older, grayer, but his eyes still held the kindness I'd fallen in love with years ago. "She told me you were institutionalized," he admitted, shame coloring his voice. "That you'd completely broken down and were never coming back. She showed me papers, medical documents. They looked official." "What kind of papers?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling back through old emails. "Guardianship documents. She said you'd signed over custody permanently because you knew you couldn't care for Leela. Then 6 months later, she called me crying, said you'd died in the facility." Troy's hands shook. "She told me that you'd hurt yourself, that it was too much for you to handle." "She told you I died in there," I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. I should have verified, should have visited you, should have done something. But I was young and scared, and I believed her." After meeting with Troy, I made a decision. I needed concrete proof of my mother's lies, something undeniable that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. I called Marjorie, keeping my voice calm and professional. "We need to talk," I said. "About Leela, about what happens next." She agreed to meet at a coffee shop, somewhere public where she'd feel safe. I arrived early, setting up my phone in my purse with the recording app running. In our state, one-party consent for recordings was legal. When Marjorie sat down across from me, her face was hard and defensive. "If you're here to make threats..." "I'm here to understand," I interrupted. "Why did you tell everyone I died? Why did you change Leela's birth certificate?" For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then something in her expression shifted and she leaned forward. "Because it was better for everyone," she said quietly. "You were falling apart, Danica. The depression, the crying, the way you looked at that baby like she was a stranger. You were going to hurt her or yourself or both." "I was sick," I said. "I could have gotten better." "Could you?" Marjorie's voice was sharp. "Or would you have struggled for years, dragging that child through your instability? I gave Leela a stable home, a normal childhood. I protected her from the mess you would have made of her life. By telling her I was dead." "Yes," Marjorie said simply. It was easier than explaining that her mother couldn't handle being a mother. It gave her closure, let her move on. "You altered documents for Leela's sake," I said carefully, making sure the recording caught every word. Marjorie nodded. "Everything I did was for her." The recording ended with Marjorie's chilling final statement. "You were never meant to come back, Danica. I made sure of that." She'd said it coldly, without remorse, before standing up and walking away. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, listening to the recording over and over, making sure every word was clear. Then I made copies, saved them to cloud storage, and sent them to both Carlos and Patricia. But time was running out. 3 days later, Carlos called with urgent news. "Your mother filed paperwork to transfer Leela to a school in another state," he said. "She's planning to move within the month, claims it's for better educational opportunities." My blood ran cold. Marjorie was running again, taking Leela somewhere I wouldn't be able to find her easily. Somewhere she could maintain her lies without me showing up to complicate things. "She won't leave with my child again," I said, the words coming out harder than I intended. Carlos was quiet for a moment. "Then you need to act fast, file for custody, get a lawyer, make this official. And you need to go public with what she's done. The more people who know the truth, the harder it'll be for her to disappear." He was right. I'd been trying to handle this quietly, to protect Leela from public scandal. But my mother had left me no choice. That afternoon, I contacted a family journalist I'd met years ago at a legal aid center, someone who specialized in custody cases and parental rights. I told her everything, provided documentation, played the recording. "This is incredible," she said, her voice full of anger on my behalf. "And heartbreaking. Can I write about it?" "Yes," I said. "Write everything." The article went live 2 days later on a regional news website. "Mother declared dead by own parent. A custody fraud case," read the headline. The journalist had been thorough, including interviews with Troy, Patricia, and even the clerk from the Vital Records office. The story spread quickly through local social media, shared hundreds of times within hours. My phone started ringing constantly with reporters, with old friends I hadn't heard from in years, with strangers offering support. But the call I was waiting for came that evening. "Marjorie, you think this will make her love you?" she screamed when I answered. No greeting, no pretense of civility. "You think destroying everything I've built, humiliating me publicly, will make Leela want to know you?" "I think she deserves the truth," I replied calmly. "And so do you. You can't run to another state and pretend this didn't happen anymore." "I gave her everything." Marjorie's voice cracked. "A home, stability, a normal life." "What can you offer her? A mother who fell apart, who couldn't handle the most basic responsibility." "A mother who got better," I said, "who never stopped fighting to find her, who loves her enough to tell her the truth even when it's hard." Marjorie was crying now, harsh, angry sobs. "She'll hate you for this, for disrupting her life, for making her question everything she knows. You'll lose her again just like before." "Maybe," I admitted, "but at least this time it'll be her choice, not yours." The line went dead. I took a risk that would either bring me closer to Leela or get me arrested for trespassing. The article had mentioned Leela's school, and I learned they were having an open house that week. I dressed professionally, borrowed a friend's school district badge, and walked in posing as a visiting teacher interested in their music program. The school was bright and modern, with student artwork lining the halls. I found Leela in the music room during the break, talking to another girl her age. I stayed back, pretending to examine the bulletin board while listening to their conversation. "Did you see that article online?" Leela's friend asked quietly. "The one about the custody fraud, it's all over town." My heart stopped. "No," Leela said, but her voice sounded uncertain. "What article?" Her friend pulled out her phone, scrolling. "This woman who was declared dead by her mom, but she's actually alive. It's so crazy. The grandmother just stole her kid," and she stopped, looking up at Leela with wide eyes. "Oh my God, the girl in the story is your age, and the grandmother's name is Marjorie." Leela grabbed the phone, reading quickly. I watched her face go pale, watched her hands start shaking. "That's my grandma," she whispered. That's my name in this article. They didn't publish it, but the details." Her friend looked horrified. "Sometimes I dream my mom is alive," Leela said suddenly, her voice breaking. "I've had these dreams since I was little, where she's out there somewhere looking for me." Our eyes met across the hall. This time, recognition didn't just flicker. It bloomed, full and undeniable. Leela knew. I left before anyone could question my presence, but I knew what would happen next. Leela would confront Marjorie. The truth was out now, too public to contain. That night my phone rang. It was Troy. "Leela called me," he said, his voice shaking. Crying, confused, she asked if her mother was really dead. "I told her the truth, Danica, that you're alive, that Marjorie lied to all of us." "How did she react?" I asked, gripping the phone. "She hung up and said she needed to talk to her grandmother." "That was an hour ago, and I haven't heard from her since. I'm worried, Danica. Marjorie's been acting erratic according to some neighbors I still know. If Leela confronts her..." He didn't finish the sentence. Neither did I. We both knew that cornered animals were dangerous, and my mother had just been publicly exposed as a liar and fraud. I got in my car and drove to Marjorie's house, my hands shaking on the wheel. The neighborhood was quiet when I arrived, lights on in various houses, everything looking peaceful and normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. Through the front window, I could see movement, shadows moving frantically. Then I heard the scream, Leela's voice, high and frightened. I ran to the door, not bothering to knock, just trying the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, the scene was chaos. Marjorie stood in the living room, her face red and twisted with rage. Leela was backed against the wall, her cheek bright red. My mother had slapped her. "Why does that woman look like me?" Leela was demanding, tears streaming down her face. "Why do I have her eyes, her hair, everything? Why did you tell me she was dead?" Marjorie raised her hand again. "Stop lying," Leela screamed. That's when Marjorie saw me in the doorway. Time seemed to slow. Marjorie's hand was still raised, Leela was still crying, and I was frozen in the doorway trying to decide what to do. Then Leela's eyes met mine, and she made the decision for both of us. She ran, past her grandmother, past the furniture, straight to me. I caught her as she crashed into my arms, this girl I'd last held as a baby, now nearly as tall as me. She was shaking, sobbing into my shoulder. "I think I believe you," she whispered against my neck. "I think you're really my mom." My throat was too tight to speak. I just held her, one hand on her back, the other cradling her head like I used to when she was tiny. Marjorie watched us, her face crumpling. "Leela, please, come back inside. We can talk about this calmly." But Leela shook her head, pulling back to look at me. "Do you have proof?" she asked. "That you're my mother, that you didn't die?" I nodded, leading her to my car. From the glove compartment, I pulled out a folder I'd been carrying everywhere. Birth certificates, hospital records, photographs, everything I'd collected. But most importantly, I pulled out a box. "What's this?" Leela asked. "Letters," I said simply. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every major milestone I knew you'd have. I wrote you letters. Your grandmother returned them all marked deceased, but I kept writing anyway, just in case someday I get to give them to you." Leela opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each carefully labeled with dates and occasions. Letters I'd written to a daughter who didn't know I existed. Marjorie's car pulled up outside my apartment at that moment, her headlights cutting through the darkness. Leela clutched the box of letters as Marjorie's car door slammed. My mother rushed toward us, her face a mask of desperation and rage. "Get away from her," Marjorie screamed. "Leela, get in the car right now." But Leela moved closer to me instead, and I positioned myself between her and my mother. "She's 15 years old," I said calmly, "old enough to make some choices for herself, and she chose to hear the truth." "The truth?" Marjorie laughed bitterly. "You want to tell her the truth? Fine. Tell her how you cried for hours after she was born, how you couldn't bond with her, couldn't even look at her some days. Tell her about the medication, the therapy, the doctors who said you needed to be hospitalized." "I was sick," I said steadily. "Postpartum depression is a medical condition, not a character flaw. I got treatment. I got better. And you stole my daughter while I was recovering." Leela pulled out one of the letters, opening it with shaking hands. She read aloud, her voice breaking. "Dear Leela, today you turn 8 years old. I wonder if you like soccer or dance or reading. I wonder if you know that somewhere your mother is thinking of you, loving you, missing you every single day." She looked up at Marjorie, tears streaming down her face. "You told me she didn't want me, that she died because she couldn't handle being a mother. You made me think I wasn't enough to make her stay." "I protected you," Marjorie insisted, but her voice lacked conviction now. "From what?" Leela demanded. "From having a mother who loved me, from the truth." I pulled out my phone, my hand steady now. "There's something else you need to hear, Leela. A recording I made of your grandmother admitting what she did." I pressed play. Marjorie's voice filled the quiet street, tinny through my phone's speaker but perfectly clear. "I altered documents for Leela's sake. Everything I did was for her." Then my voice, "You told her I was dead." "Yes, it was easier than explaining that her mother couldn't handle being a mother. It gave her closure, let her move on." The recording continued, each word another nail in the coffin of my mother's lies. "You were never meant to come back, Danica. I made sure of that." Leela's face went white as she listened. When the recording ended, she turned to Marjorie with something like horror in her eyes. "Stop lying," she said again, but this time it came out as a broken whisper. "You stole my mother from me. You made me grieve someone who was alive. How could you do that?" Marjorie stepped forward, reaching for Leela, but my daughter moved back. "I loved you," Marjorie said desperately. "I raised you, fed you, put you through school. I gave you everything." "Except the truth," Leela replied. "Except my real mother." Marjorie's face crumpled. She looked suddenly old, all her carefully maintained composure shattered. "You would have ruined her," she said to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you'd raised her with your depression, your instability, you would have damaged that beautiful child. I saved her from you." "No," I said softly. "You stole from both of us, and you did it because you wanted control, not because you wanted to protect her." Marjorie collapsed onto the curb, sitting heavily like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "She would have been better off," she muttered, more to herself than to us. "I know what's best. I always know what's best." The legal process moved quickly once I had the recording. My lawyer, a woman specializing in family reunification cases, filed an emergency motion for custody. She submitted the audio recording, the fraudulent death certificate, the altered birth certificate, Troy's testimony, Patricia's statement, everything. The judge listened to the recording 3 times during the emergency hearing. Marjorie sat across the courtroom, her lawyer trying desperately to argue that she'd acted in good faith, believing I was truly unfit. "My client made difficult decisions during a crisis," he argued. "She believed she was protecting her granddaughter from an unstable parent." But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge's face grew harder with each document reviewed. "Ms. Marjorie, you filed a fraudulent death certificate," she said finally. "You altered legal birth records. You lied to law enforcement, medical professionals, and most importantly, to a child about her own mother's existence. This goes far beyond protective grandparenting. This is identity fraud, document forgery, and parental alienation." The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered her ruling. "I'm granting temporary shared custody to Ms. Danica, pending a full investigation into the fraudulent documents. Marjorie, you will remain in Leela's life under supervised visitation only, and you are hereby ordered to attend family therapy sessions." Marjorie's face went blank, like she couldn't process what was happening. "You can't," she whispered. "She's mine, I raised her." "She was never yours to keep," the judge replied firmly. Court adjourned. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. I pushed through them without comment, Leela's hand tight in mine. Troy met us at my car, his face a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. "I should have known," he said again for the 100th time. "I should have checked." "You believed someone you trusted," I replied. "We both did, but it's over now." The news coverage was intense. Local channels ran stories about the case, calling it one of the most egregious examples of parental alienation they'd seen. My mother's name and face were everywhere, her reputation in the small town completely destroyed. People she'd known for decades stopped talking to her. Her church asked her to step down from volunteer positions. The life she'd built on lies crumbled in days. I felt no satisfaction in watching it happen. Just sadness for all the wasted years, all the damage that could never be fully repaired. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Vanessa, filed formal charges against Marjorie for identity fraud and document falsification. The district attorney's office took the case seriously, calling it a clear violation of multiple laws. "She won't face jail time," Vanessa explained during one of our meetings, "given her age and the fact that Leela was well cared for physically. But she'll face fines, probation, and permanent loss of unsupervised custody rights." The investigation turned up even more lies. Marjorie had filed tax returns claiming Leela as a dependent using the altered birth certificate. She'd collected survivor benefits meant for children of deceased parents, forging my death certificate to access them. Each new revelation made the scope of her deception clearer. The court hearing for the formal custody arrangement happened 6 weeks after our first encounter on Marjorie's porch. The judge reviewed all the evidence, heard testimony from Troy, Patricia, and even Leela herself. My daughter stood in front of the judge, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I want to live with my mom," she said. "My real mom, Danica. I love my grandmother, but she lied to me my whole life. I can't trust her anymore." The judge granted me primary custody, with Leela splitting her time between my apartment and Troy's house on weekends. Marjorie was allowed supervised visits twice a month, pending successful completion of therapy. When the gavel came down, making it official, I felt something inside me finally settle. 15 years of fighting, of being told I was crazy, of being erased, all of it validated in a single moment. Leela hugged me tightly in the courtroom hallway afterward. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "Home, my apartment, our home." "Yeah," I said, tears in my eyes. "Let's go home." The transition wasn't easy. Leela had spent 15 years believing one version of her story, and adjusting to the truth took time. She had nightmares at first, waking up crying, asking me to promise I was real and wouldn't disappear. We started therapy together, working through layers of trauma and loss. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. Our bond grew through honesty and small moments. Making pancakes on Saturday mornings, with Leela teaching me the way Marjorie had shown her, both of us crying and laughing at the strangeness of it. Late-night talks where she asked questions about her birth, about my depression, about everything I'd missed in her childhood. I answered honestly, holding nothing back. She deserved that much. "Do you hate Grandma?" she asked me one night, curled up on my couch under a blanket. I thought about the question carefully. "I hate what she did," I said finally. "But she's still your grandmother. She raised you with love, even if that love was twisted by control and fear. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about her." Leela nodded against my shoulder. "I miss her sometimes," she admitted. "The version of her I thought I knew. Then I remember the lies and I get angry all over again." "That's normal," I assured her. "Grief and anger can exist together." 3 months after moving in with me, Leela came home from school and found me in the kitchen. She hesitated in the doorway, nervous about something. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course, anything." She took a deep breath. "Can I start calling you Mom now? Not just Danica, Mom." My vision blurred with tears. "I would love that more than anything." 6 months after our reunion, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address was from an assisted living facility 2 hours away. Marjorie had moved there after the criminal charges were finalized, unable to face the judgment and whispers in our town. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The letter was written in my mother's shaky handwriting, her age showing more clearly now. "Danica," it began, "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable, but I need you to understand that I truly believed I was protecting Leela. I watched you fall apart after her birth, and I was terrified. Terrified you'd hurt her, hurt yourself. I thought I was saving you both. I know now that I was wrong, that my need for control destroyed 2 lives instead of protecting one. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I think about you both every day, about the years I stole. I'll understand if you never want to speak to me again, but please tell Leela that I love her, that everything I did, wrong as it was, came from love. Mother, I read the letter twice, then carried it to the living room where Leela was doing homework. This came today," I said, handing it to her. "From your grandmother. You don't have to read it if you don't want to." Leela took the letter, reading it silently. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and held it to the corner of the letter. "Sometimes," I said softly, "the best response is to let go completely." We watched the paper burn, curl, and turn to ash. Leela came to stand beside me, leaning her head on my shoulder. Through the window, I could see our reflection in the darkening glass, mother and daughter finally together. "She told you I was dead," I said quietly, wrapping my arm around Leela. "But the truth is, I never stopped fighting to live for you. Every day I was gone, I was fighting to get back to you." Leela hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you didn't give up." Behind us on the mantel sat a new photograph, one we'd taken just last week, both of us smiling at the camera, real and alive and together. No more lies, no more secrets, just truth and time and the slow, careful work of healing. My mother had tried to erase me, but she'd failed. Because love doesn't die just because someone declares it dead. It waits, patient and persistent, for the moment it can finally bloom again. And ours was blooming now, imperfect and beautiful, rooted in honesty instead of lies. That evening, Leela and I made dinner together, moving around the small kitchen with the comfortable rhythm we'd developed. She told me about school, about her friends, about the piano recital coming up. Normal teenage things. Things I'd missed for 15 years but would never miss again. As we sat down to eat, Leela looked at me across the table. "Mom," she said, testing out the word again, smiling when it felt right. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for finding me, for not giving up even when everyone said you were gone." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'll never give up on you, Leela, not ever again. That's a promise I'll keep for the rest of my life." And I meant it, every word. The years my mother had stolen couldn't be returned. The childhood moments I'd missed were gone forever, but we had now. We had tomorrow. We had all the days stretching ahead of us, unwritten and full of possibility. My mother had told my daughter I was dead. But the truth, the real truth, was simpler and stronger than any lie. I'd never stopped being Leela's mother. Distance couldn't change it. Time couldn't erase it. Lies couldn't destroy it. Blood makes family, but love makes it eternal. And our love had survived everything meant to kill it. We'd both been ghosts, haunting lives built on false foundations. But now we were real, solid here, together. Finally, impossibly, beautifully together. And that was better than any revenge could ever be.